Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm Jordan Hill. With me, as always, Kipp Adams. We got Rusty Mansell out on the road, keeping the roads hot as we go through these summer months. Kipp, how's it holding up for you?
Man, my nest system is getting pushed to the limit right now. All I could say is, guys, stay hydrated. When that sun sets, man, it's a beautiful thing right now. It is not cool outside right now. It's pretty warm. So good luck, Rusty, and to all those teams out there in the 7-on-7s right now in practice. Yeah, stay hydrated because it is something else out there right now. I just went to my physical therapy session and I broke a sweat just getting to the car. But then that may say a little bit more about me than the weather, but it's definitely a scorcher out there right now, Jordan.
Yeah, it's not helping the cause, that's for sure. I put it on our board. I've started waking up earlier to walk the dog because, by 8, 9 a.m., man, it is hot in Athens. But that's just the time of year. And you know what that lets us know, though, Kipp, is that football's really just about right around the corner.
Goodness, it really is. And there just really is no off season anymore. And I guess that's why, we do this pod year round, because there's really always something to talk about with Georgia football. And yeah, I mean, you got the freshmen, all the enrollees are now in there. You got your voluntary workouts going on, and yeah, they are right around the corner from those team workouts starting up. So yeah, we'll be talking about this upcoming season before you know it. You got still your SEC meetings coming up as well. So it's really starting to really come together now, and I'm glad we got all of our vacations out the way, because it's about to be a marathon.
Yes, we're about to be in it full force. And then let's jump into what's been the biggest news of this week. Georgia picks up another commitment in the 2023 class. This is their 9th commitment. Joshua Miller, they flip him from Penn State, a 3-star interior offensive lineman, is at least what he's projected to play. We heard a little bit of buzz about this in the hours and maybe the day or so before Joshua Miller does this flips from Penn State, a guy that I remember when Georgia first offered him. I think that might have been about a month ago. Looking through his social media, and one of the things he had said was that he was 107% committed to Penn State. Hey, Georgia, Kirby Smart and Stacey Searles, credit to those guys getting after him and making a pitch that he couldn't turn down. What's immediately your reaction to what you've gotten to see about Joshua Miller, or what you think about his addition to this 2023 class?
Well, first off, Georgia's been mentioned with a lot of interior offensive linemen this cycle and a lot of really highly rated guys. So, when a guy like Joshua Miller comes in and commits, I guess some people look and go, okay, not the highest rated guy in the world, even though when we're talking about, interior offensive lineman, that's not the premier position like an edge rusher or even a left tackle. In Georgia, there were some highly rated guys, Madden Sanker, TJ Shanahan they're still involved with, several different guys that, again, have 4 stars next to their name and have been mentioned with Georgia a lot more. But here's the thing about Joshua Miller. Like you said, in the middle of May, they extend that offer. That's one of those, evaluation offers. Stacey Searles goes and sees him, is impressed. They extend an offer. Well, what does Joshua Miller do? June 1st, he makes sure he's right there in Athens, and he works out for Stacey Searles and Eddie Gordon. And right there, that tells you what his mindset was. He probably knew the deal. Georgia doesn't have a bunch of spots to hand out on the offensive line, but really the interior offensive line. They already have, one guy committed in Raquise McElderry. And so maybe there's one spot, maybe there's 2. He comes in and works out. And what he did was he shook the board up. He came in there and impressed the coaching staff, and they had to go back and say, you know what, this is a guy that maybe we need to move to the top of the board, and we need to make sure he knows he's got a spot. And they probably let him know, and he took it. And that was his point. It says a lot about Joshua Miller. And if you just look at him as a prospect, he's a guy that listed at 6'5", 320. I think that's a situation where, he worked to improve his body, and you could see that in some of the recent workout videos for him, not just the ones where he's dunking a basketball, but just ones where he's out there, doing his own little workouts. He's got some athleticism, and I still don't even believe he's over 300 pounds just because of his body makeup. It's just a situation where that's a guy that put in the time, put in the work, reshaped his body. And we've seen guys do that on the offensive line and really move up Georgia's recruiting board. And that's just exactly what he did. He just worked out, impressed the coaching staff. I think he's probably 6'4", 6'4.5", barefoot, just a little bit over 300 pounds now. I think he's under 310 now. So he's already, again, made more moves to that weight, listed at 320. But they have him running the 40. They have him doing footwork drills out there. They knew exactly what they were getting in Joshua Miller, and the fact that they were ready to take him with other guys in town and on official visits just tells you that he was a guy that their eval says they should take him now and worry about it later with the numbers. And so that just tells me where Stacey Searles is, where Kirby Smart, Todd Monken are on their board. When they have a guy and they work him out in camp and they give him the green light, that's about as updated as an evaluation as you can really get.
Yeah, Kipp, you hit on a lot of the stuff that I was going to kind of talk about with Joshua. And shout out to Rusty. He had this on our board. So if you're a board member, you've probably already seen this. Measured at 6'4.5", 309 when he came in for that June 1st workout, ran like a 5'2", 40. I think it's a situation where sometimes, fans get a little caught up on just looking directly at the recruiting ranking and say, well, this guy's a 3-star. What are we doing putting him at this position? Why are we making him such a priority? I think, like you said, Kipp, a lot of credit needs to go to Joshua Miller for the work he's put in to make the most of really this offseason, trying to get his body right, try to get himself in a position where he is a highly coveted offensive line recruit. And I think you see how that worked out for him, the fact that he gets this opportunity and has committed to Georgia. And, I wanted to make sure, too, because a big part of this conversation is offensive line in the 2023 class. How many guys are Georgia going to take? How many, how are sort of the puzzles going to come together? How are the pieces going to come together with right now 3 offensive line commits? I wrote a little bit about this on Monday after Joshua committed, but what do you sort of make of Georgia's options with 3 guys committed at the offensive line, including 2 interior guys? What do you sort of see them doing with the guys that are still kind of in the mix and what might wind up looking like as far as the offensive lineman Georgia brings in as part of the 2023 class?
I think it's pretty clear right now that Georgia, they have 1 offensive tackle on board right now in Bo Hughley out of Langston Hughes High School in Fairburn, Georgia. That's a guy that's 6'7", 290 pounds, really has the frame you look for and checks all the boxes of what Georgia's looking for as far as athleticism and that upside at the offensive tackle position. A guy that schools like Auburn and other programs are still recruiting and trying to work on, but right now keeping him is probably pretty high on the priority list, and I think Georgia's in a really good spot right now to keep him in the fold. But they want to add another offensive tackle to the list, and so I think you look at Monroe Feeling out of Pleasant, South Carolina. Oceanside Collegiate, another top 100 guy, just like Bo Hughley. And again, 6'7", over 280 pounds, similar frame, a guy that could probably play left tackle down the road if you want him to, left or right tackle. Gives you that flexibility, which is really something that I can tell is crucial this class. It's just that you want the versatility. They always say you want someone who could play all 5 offensive line positions, but I really think Georgia's put an emphasis on guys who, if they need to plug them in at left guard or center or right tackle, they could do that just to give them, the ability to change their lineups depending on whether guys get hurt or development of guys. And I think that Monroe is a guy that Stacey Searles has been in on for a long time, back when he was at North Carolina. So that established relationship, that's really the guy that we've kind of seen throughout this cycle at Dawgs 247 as a guy that we think Georgia has a really good chance with. And so, you're still recruiting other guys. You don't even have an official visit set with him yet. He's taken an official visit to Notre Dame. He's got one coming to Florida and Miami as well. But I think Georgia is going to get him on campus again, and they have a really, really good chance with him. And then you also just have Samson Okunlola out of Braintree, Massachusetts. He's a 5-star, number 3 offensive tackle in the country. I believe he's going to be in town this week, if not today as we record this show. I think he's either going to be in town Monday or Tuesday with his team. There's 7-on-7 tournaments going on at Georgia this week. I think there's going to be 4 tournaments, to be honest with you. So that means it's probably going to be upwards of 50, 60 high schools. But they're also just going to have recruits every day as they have all June. Anytime they can get a guy on campus, they're going to get a guy on campus. And Samson, again, 6'5", 305 pounds, a 5-star prospect. Getting a guy like that on campus is huge. He's taken an official visit to Michigan State. He's got Alabama this weekend. So anytime you can get a guy like that on campus and continue to recruit him and try to make a move on that is something that obviously Stacy Searles wants to do. But if you can land one of those guys with the group he has, he can be really, really selective. And obviously, if they have 4 guys in the boat, they can really start to look and see if they want to take a 5th guy. And I think it's possible they take 5 offensive linemen this cycle, but it has to be the right 5. And just to make things more interesting, I mean, we had a guy just coming off an official visit, Kelton Smith out of Carver High School in Columbus, Georgia. I think Georgia's in a really, really good place for him, 6'5", 300 pounds. And like I said, he's one of those guys that could play 4 or 5 positions on the offensive line. So he fits exactly what Georgia's looking for, and he's an in-state guy. And so I think, really coming off the official visit last week with him, I really like where Georgia is. And he's coming back with his teammates to the 7-on-7 this week as well and bringing his family. And when you make that return trip, ride around, and you bring your family again, probably bodes well for a school's chances to land that recruit.
No doubt about it. I mean, Kelton Smith, Carver, Columbus, obviously Dale McGee knows that school well, having coached down there. And I can tell you, too, from being a former Columbus Ledger-Enquirer reporter, if they're coming out of Carver, Columbus, they're really, really talented. And, the situation that's going to be very interesting to follow with offensive line going forward is just what you said, Kipp, is, who winds up getting these spots, because there's a limited number of spots. But, that's sort of the beauty of where Georgia is in recruiting right now. You can pick and choose, and, there's going to be guys that don't wind up becoming Bulldogs, but you got to make the right choices with the talent ahead of you. And, it's going to be something to follow. We'll see how Stacy Searles and Kirby as well, how they kind of handle this and decide who is the best fit going forward. Well, on that, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back in a few moments, talk just a little bit about these last few weekends of visits, and talk a little bit more about what's going on in the recruiting scene. Welcome back, everybody. Well, before we talk about some of the visits we've seen the last few weeks, I saw Craig Lawson in the chat was asking about the biggest competition for Justice Haynes. Kipp, what's sort of your feel on Justice, who obviously is a Georgia legacy with his dad having been a Bulldog? Who is sort of the other team or teams you think are really pushing to get him when it's all said and done?
Yeah, it's a big cycle for Dale McGee. Got to restock that offensive backfield. And Justin Haynes is definitely one of the best in the country, the number 4 running back in the country in both 24/7 Sports and the composite rankings. Recently, I think, transferred to Buford, Georgia. So he's going to be over there helping the Wolves on another championship run. It's been a busy month for him. He took his official visit to Georgia first on June 3rd. Coming off an official visit to Florida, and he's got Alabama and Ohio State, to round out this month. It's interesting because a lot of these schools are kind of recruiting the same running backs, and they're all kind of in the mix for the same guys. But Dale needs to get 2 guys this cycle. And I mean, Justice, if you're looking for that first guy, he's obviously, being a legacy recruit and being in state, he's moved at the top of the list for Dale McGee, and I think he's made him a priority throughout the cycle. So if I'm looking at these schools and I'm trying to pinpoint who I think has the best chance of pushing Georgia, I'm going to go with Ohio State just based on what they've been able to do recently at the position, but also I think that he's got a good relationship with that coaching staff. But I still say, Georgia's going to be hard to beat here. And I think, if you're the other schools, you're taking your shot, you kind of know that, Georgia is going to be in a very good place. I mean, if you look at his father, Veron Haynes, pretty famous Georgia Bulldog player, made some big plays, made a pretty good play in Knoxville, kind of pretty famous for that. But just being that legacy, he's given everyone a fair shot. But I think Georgia's been in the back of his mind throughout. He's just trying to, be diligent in the process and make sure it's the right fit because, he's trying to only do this process once. Transfer portal obviously gives you a chance to do it more than once if it doesn't work out, but you'd rather get it right the first time, especially at running back. That's the one position where if you're going to be 3 and out, you want to be that as a running back to have minimal wear and tear, so you can go to the league and try to get 1 or 2 contracts if possible. So I think when all is said and done, I think that he will be Dale McGee's first running back commitment this cycle, and then he can really start to focus on some of these other guys. And he's got maybe the best running back in the country coming in this weekend in Richard Young out of Florida, 5-star guy that Dale McGee's battling for. And that'll probably be a little bit tougher battle with guys like Alabama and Oklahoma and Notre Dame in the mix for him. I think Alabama kind of has some momentum with Richard Young right now, but I think Georgia is the one school that's going to push them. And if Dale McGee can land a running back tandem like Richard Young and Justice Haynes, then that's kind of restocking that backfield with those duos that we kind of saw a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of Georgia really pushing to maintain that argument for RBU, which we hear so often. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with Justice because obviously a lot of, top teams are really pushing to get him to sign when it's all said and done. But doesn't hurt when your dad is responsible for P44 Haynes. There's a lot of Georgia fans that'd be happy to see him in the red and black when it's all said and done. Kipp, we talked, I guess that's been a week or so ago now, coming off the Arch Manning visit. We talked about how important that was. We talked about sort of, the aftermath of it, where we felt Georgia stood, not only with Arch, but, a lot of the other people that were in town for that visit. Obviously there was double-digit recruits that were a part of that weekend. And since that time, there's been some other big visits to Athens. We've seen some guys that Georgia really, really covets having come in, had a chance to check out the program once again. And you and I both have had a chance to talk to a few guys and sort of get a feel for what they thought once they were leaving Athens. What sort of sticks out to you from what you've heard, whether it's from specific players these last few weeks or just generally sort of the vibe you've gotten from the recruits you've been talking to?
Well, there's kind of several levels of guys as far as the 9 official visitors they had in town last week. I'll start with just the guys that they came into the weekend in a really good place with. And it starts with Joel Nell Aguero, the 5-star safety out of St. John's in Massachusetts, the number 2 safety in the country. We have thought that Georgia's been in a good place, I guess, through most of his recruitment, really. And coming off the official visit, and then right before that, just setting that commitment date for July 23rd. When he's able to kind of already know he's ready to make a decision, that bodes pretty well for a school that's kind of in the lead at the moment. And I think Georgia is well positioned there. He's on campus at Florida right now for an official visit. Still has Ohio State this weekend and Miami next week. I still like Georgia's chances of him. And I mean, that's, a big need for Georgia this cycle is help at the safety position. I think we've talked multiple times about the safety depth is just not where Kirby Smart would like it to be right now. So this cycle, you're going to want to get a couple guys that can potentially come in and help out in year 1 or year 2. And he's obviously a guy that profiles in that, in that arena, that has that kind of talent to be able to come in and help him out a lot. And yeah, I think they came out in a really good place for him. And also with Jamal Jarrett, you see a guy like Jordan Davis in town over the weekend, just happens to be back in Athens. And if there's any recruit in this cycle who we're going to put that pressure on them to have that comparison to a guy like Jordan Davis, it's going to be Jamal Jarrett, just because he's a guy that's 6'5", pushing 340 pounds, but the athleticism is truly remarkable for a player that size. And the fact that he's from North Carolina and Greensboro, that's just another connection there to Jordan Davis, with him coming out of Mauer Creek. So I think for Georgia, they were in a really good place for him. And I mean, he gave me a glowing report. He basically said, I've been to Auburn, I've been to North Carolina. This official visit kind of reset the bar for me. And honestly, he basically sounded like he's not sure if he needs to take any more visits. He might be a guy that announces a decision, if not in June, then maybe in July. So that's another prospect that I really like where Georgia's at. And again, you get a guy with that kind of size, and obviously in Georgia's defense, that's exactly what you want along your defensive front. Guys with size and athleticism. If you can ever get both, it's kind of an elite duo. And I think Jamal Jarrett kind of checks those boxes for Georgia. So I think those are two guys I already liked where Georgia stood with. And then as far as momentum guys where maybe Georgia made a move with, that kind of starts with Tyler Williams, the wide receiver who recently transferred to Lakeland, Florida, 6'3", 180 pounds, a 4-star guy, a guy that Brian McClendon is really keyed in on in this cycle. I think if you're going to look for a coach who's probably the busiest this cycle, it's Brian McClendon, because I think they're going to try to bring in maybe 4 wide receivers this cycle, and he is recruiting a lot of guys for those spots. But I kind of like where Tyler Williams is coming out of this official visit. I know that Steve Wilfong went ahead and put in a crystal ball for Tyler Williams to Georgia, but he still has some visits left. He's at South Carolina now. Got Texas A&M later this month. He's kind of that X factor. I don't really know when he plans on making a decision. Once we get a better feel for his timeline, I could really like where Georgia stands. I like where they stand right now, and I think they've kind of made a move in his recruitment. And then before I mentioned Kelton Smith out of Carver, he's coming off that official visit. I think Georgia's in a good spot with him. So if I'm looking at this group of 9 and I'm saying these are guys I could see in Georgia's class as of now, those are probably the 4 I would go with. It's tough to pick among the linebackers who have taken official visits, but just because Glenn Schumann has basically got his pick this cycle. And, when you produce multiple Butkus Award winners and, have the 3 guys drafted he just did with Quay Walker, Channing Tindall, and obviously Kobe Dean, you're able to have the recruiting equity to basically pick who you want. And that's kind of what Glenn Schumann's being able to do this cycle. So it's tough to really get a feel for who's at the top of the board, but he's going to probably pick 3 from this group of 7 he's got on official visits this month. And I think Troy Boyles is probably one of those guys that's close to the top, if not at the top. And so that's a guy that, coming off the official visit, Georgia's probably in a pretty good place with him as well. Got Ohio State later this month to watch in his recruitment. But again, I think there's a lot of momentum right now, even if maybe it's not showing up on that public commitment list right now. I think that, they're well into the double digits of guys that the coaching staff has a good feel for them being in this class. And I think that we're going to see some of those guys over the next 4 to 6 weeks probably go public with their commitments to Georgia.
People were talking about it being a quiet June. Well, brother, it is not quiet for very much longer. That much is clear. There was 2 things that I kind of want to hit on just off of what you had said. One, Troy Bowles, if you recognize that name, his father is Todd Bowles, former Jets head coach and now Buccaneers head coach. So obviously that would be very, very interesting if he winds up going and winds up going to Georgia. I thought it was very interesting that Rusty pointed out last week that Brandon Boykin was talking to the team, and Brandon had actually played for Todd Bowles once upon a time. So that was pretty good timing as far as getting him in. They always kind of have things thought out in that way. And I thought, too, when you're talking about Jamal Jarrett, you talk about Jordan Davis coming back to town. The thing I kept thinking about was it was at Pro Day this year that, Kirby was asked about producing guys like Jordan Davis, producing guys like George Pickens, what that does for you in recruiting. And, I thought Kirby made a very, very good point, again, which we saw with that visit. He said, you show the next Jordan Davis. You show the next George Pickens, hey, George Pickens came from here. I think that's invaluable. I mean, as much as, talk about like NIL and things like that have come into the picture, these guys still want to go play in the NFL one day. That's a big dream for, I'd say, the majority of the type of players that Georgia's bringing in. And we saw clearly with Jamal Jarrett that they understood that would be appealing to him to have Jordan Davis on site and to say, hey, we did it with him, and this is an opportunity where you can come to Georgia and do it for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And again, these are the type of guys that you're coming off a national championship with. You have as many recruiting points as you possibly could want to have right now, whether it's uniforms that they're never going to wear again, or whether it's thrones that it looks like every school now has a throne. I mean, the photo shoot has become such a huge part of the official visit, and the amount of props that these schools are starting to have is it's starting to, I just have to chuckle every time I see the pictures, whether it's an axe, a baseball bat. I'm still waiting to see what the next thing will be, but Georgia seems to have it kind of down on the official visits. I think now that we're hearing guys that have taken more than one this month and compare them, Georgia's starting to compare really well just in their organization, just and how they have everything scheduled out, and also just the interaction that they're able to have, even though they have, again, double digits of official visitors in town at the same time in June, which again we haven't seen before. But it looks like this coaching staff had a pretty good plan for that. The recruits I talked to, the one thing that kind of stood out was, even though they had that many guys there, how much time they got to spend with Kirby Smart and how much time he made sure to give them. So it sounds like Kirby still kind of knows what he's doing in this recruiting game. And, another June where maybe some questions are being asked about Georgia's recruiting class, it sounds like Kirby, once again, has most of the answers that are going to help him get another pretty special class and kind of reload this roster heading into 2023 and beyond.
Well, we'll get ready to wrap this episode up here in a few minutes. I want to talk about a story I did today, which truthfully, this has been something that I've really kept tabs on and been really intrigued by this offseason, and it's been Georgia going through the transfer portal. We saw last year Georgia added 3 guys, 2 which were really big, and Darion Kendrick. Well, actually, Darion Kendrick was really the big guy. Tyke Smith was dealing with injuries. Eric Gilbert obviously wasn't really with the team, but got a really high expectations going into this year. And so far, we're talking I think it's June 13th, June 14th, no transfer portal additions. And it's been sort of a surprise. I did a story today on it, and the only other FBS programs as it stands that has not had a transfer portal addition, Navy, Army, and Air Force, which you can obviously understand being service academies. But it's really intriguing to see, what has caused this, what sort of the thinking on it. And the big things that really stand out to me, which I think we've talked about before, going into right after spring, we talked about potentially who they could target in the portal, but it's a numbers game. I mean, as we stand right now, I believe we project Georgia to have 88 scholarship players as it stands. There's a question about if some of those freshmen may walk on, if there will be forward counters, how they could potentially get below that. But even if they do get below it, it's not going to be by much. And then on the other hand, you look at the amount of players that Georgia has signed and the amount of players that are just coming back on this team. You signed 30 players from the high school ranks in that 2022 class. That was tied for the most in the nation. That was tied with like Texas A&M. And you look too, I wrote in that story, I would really encourage anyone listening, if you're interested in the portal and sort of how things work. Well, it really struck me with the fact that Georgia signed that many players in the high school ranks. If you look at the top 5 schools that had the most guys signed, Georgia by far has the most returning lettermen. They've got a lot of experience coming back. They've got a lot of players coming back. I think that, contributed to this. I think the fact there's not a lot of wiggle room. I think the amount of experience they have, and the fact not many people left after spring. If I'm remembering right, I think 3 guys, ultimately went in the portal and stayed. Whether they thought there'd be more guys who would leave or not, is not really part of the equation. The matter is not many guys left. So it's a very interesting situation when it comes to the portal. And, I think it's a situation where Kirby's talked before. Obviously, they've used the portal when they've needed to, but he's preached a lot about culture. He's preached a lot about bringing in those high school guys, sort of the traditional route, and letting them become part of the program and letting them learn under those older guys. There may be a bump or two here along the way, but this is going to be a year where we see how that works out, how that kind of comes to bear, and how they rely on some of these younger guys to maybe play bigger roles this year.
Yeah, definitely. And then there's the fact that you still have some players that were trying to graduate at their respective school so that they could leave as a graduate transfer, maybe guys that have already transferred once. So you'll kind of have another set of guys that could still enter the portal. Obviously, SEC guys, that still that deadline is passed, but graduate transfers, they're able to leave and be eligible immediately wherever they go. So it's just kind of one more group of guys that could potentially be added to the transfer portal pool. As of right now, just looking at the way it is, if Georgia was going to move on someone, they probably would have by now. But there's still have spots that you can kind of hold. Maybe there's two spots that, if a wide receiver becomes available, or, if an edge rusher becomes available, then, they'll go ahead and they'll make the move on that. But they're not going to use them just to use them. And especially guys that may have more than 1 year of eligibility. We're looking at right now the fact that there's no limit on how many guys you could sign in this upcoming cycle. So I don't think any schools are wanting to limit themselves on being able to bring in as many guys as they want to without having to use any loopholes whatsoever in this recruiting cycle. So I think Kirby Smart's probably looked at all the numbers several times and kind of figured out what they need to do. And as you said, they're just for them to bring in a guy at this point, there would probably need to be a little bit of attrition. Probably 2 or 3 guys that are walking on in year 1, but that puts them kind of right there at that limit. So if they're bringing in more than 1 guy in the transfer portal, probably still need to have a guy or 2 leave as well. So I think it's just all about maximizing the numbers that you have. And as of right now, there's still an 85 scholarship limit, and Kirby Smart's making sure every one of those 85 are, guys that he thinks can help him win football games. And I think if there's any coach in the country that's kind of mastered the art of that, it's Kirby Smart since he came on board at Georgia.
Yeah, it'll be something to follow. I made sure in that story where I mentioned that there were no pickups, I made sure and said, as of today, because you just never know, what could happen. And as I kind of wrapped up that story, when it comes to the numbers, be it Kirby Smart or whoever else, if there's a way to make a team better, if there's a will, there's a way, because they're going to maximize every spot they can get on the roster.
Yeah, he's done a great job doing that so far. And then you have to remember the fact that got a couple guys potentially that can help the team out this year who transferred last year, and Eric Gilbert and, Tyke Smith. Those are guys that if they were in the transfer portal rankings this year, they would probably be pretty highly rated. We've got outlets like Pro Football Focus already putting Gilbert as one of the top 5 tight ends for next year's draft. Obviously, very, very early speculation there, but if he has a big season, he could be one of those guys because he's definitely got the potential to play on Sundays. And if, when he's able to suit up for Georgia in a game, I think a lot of fans are going to be happy to see the results of his level of play because he's a special player and he plays at a position group that I don't think there are any equals in college football. And I haven't really seen a group like the tight end group that Todd Hartley has at Georgia right now, but I still think that Todd Monken would probably find some ways to get Gilbert the ball. So right there, that's an elite pass catcher that Georgia got without going this year to the transfer portal.
Yeah, that's a good problem to have when it comes to tight end. Well, we're going to wrap it up right there. I'll just make sure and tell everybody to be on the lookout. In the next couple of days, we'll come back and have another podcast. Going to do a mailbag. We're going to talk about what's going to be probably another big weekend as far as recruiting and visits, people coming in to check out Athens. But we're going to finish right here for this episode. I'll say thanks again to Kipp for hopping on with me. Thanks for everybody listening, watching. Be sure to rate, subscribe, share this episode. We'll let you go there. Keep cool out there and make sure that you stay on top of everything going on the message board, all the stories we got. Still a very busy time of year, even though football is not in session, and I have no doubt it's going to stay that way. So we're going to get out of there on that. Thanks, everybody. And until next time, take care.